The high school football conference previews continue to roll along. It's our second one in the week. This week, the Three Rivers Athletic Conference, and we're calling an audible. Mitch is out, but we call in Ty Taylor from WRMJ Radio. Ty, are you ready to talk some football, some track football?
I'm ready to do it, man. It's just like real life, I guess. Morrison out, Mercer County in. Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a view from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome back to View from the West podcast, the podcast covering Illinois high school football on the western side of the state of Illinois. I'm your host, Greg Armstrong, and I got to switch the script here. I'm not tossing to Mitch Stormer. I'm tossing to Ty Taylor from WRMJ Radio. Ty, you're stepping in. You've been saying big shoes to fill here, but you're the old pro here from WRMJ. You got this.
Yeah, pro might be a little bit too kind. But yeah, like I said, I'm a little nervous because Mitch was going to be on. And then last minute, it's like, oh, nope, he can't make it. So now here I am in his seat, I suppose we can say virtually. But like I said, I guess this might be his kind of protest with Morrison out of the league. Now he doesn't want to cover the track anymore.
That's right. He was on for the Northwest Upstate Illini coverage. So we got to talk about Morrison. And now that Morrison's out of the track, hey, Mercer County's in. That's your alma mater. So you're here to talk about it. It actually, I guess it works out perfectly then. So
yeah, and I'm excited too. I mean, I think the league this year will be really interesting. I think there are a lot of teams that are kind of evenly matched coming into the year, where when you kind of look at some of the matchups, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later, like midway through the season, when we get into like the divisional play, I think there's a lot of going to be teams like kind of jockeying for position. I think there are a couple of like favorites on each side that I think we know of, but in terms of the middle of the road, there should be some fun games this year. So it should be a fun year in the track and football.
I agree. I think you saw it last year play out as well. There were a lot of close games that had a lot of huge impact on which teams were headed towards that 5 wins or more and which teams were, falling short of the playoffs. And I think that this year is going to be the exact same. It may be some of the same teams playing some of those same games. So that's the exciting part. Well, before we jump into the conference and before we jump into the previews, let's thank our sponsor. We're powered by Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They provide the same sporting goods services as the big nationwide companies, but with a faster turnaround, and their uniform pricing is a fraction of what you're probably used to. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. Check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com, or shoot Cal Breedlove an email at calbreedlove@gmail.com for more information. We love our partnership with Breedlove Sporting Goods this year, and we're taking it to the next level. There's an online shop now available with View from the West merch. And Ty, I shared some of the pictures, some of the mock-ups with you. We got some County Line Clash t-shirts ready to roll. We don't play favorites. We got shirts on both sides. Right. So, the county line belongs to the Golden Eagles, or the county line belongs to the Rockets. So, however your allegiances lie, play it up, have some fun with it, support your team, and support what we're doing here at View from the West podcast. I'm excited to get t-shirts out there and kind of like drum up the excitement of these rivalries.
It'll be great. And we don't play favorites at WRMJ either, right? We love the Gold Eagles and we love the Rockets. And it's exciting that those schools are going to play again, which we'll get into later. But a trophy in that game too, which I know you and Mitch love. So we got another local trophy rivalry game in high school football between Mercer County and Rockridge. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I would like to hope that maybe we had a little influence, that, people heard our podcast claiming or, stating that we wanted more trophies. And is Dustin Murray, the athletic director from Mercer County, reached out to me in the offseason and said, hey, we're working on this. And I was like, that's excellent. That's great. So I was happy to hear it. It's exciting. I think it just makes these rivalries more fun, or just a little more real, or a little bit something different. So go ahead, check us out. Check out the online store. It's available now. You can find our link on X. And if you head there, find the shirt you like. We got a ton of different offerings out there. So I'm excited to get those in the hands of people that want to wear them. So, all right, we're here to talk about the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. We'll start on the Mississippi side of things. So we'll start with the team that grabs the headlines almost year in and year out, without question, the Princeton Tigers. Head coach Ryan Pearson had a great year last year. Again, another 10-win season for them, advancing to the 3A quarterfinals. They come up just short against Lombard Montini. Year in and year out, this Tiger program is battling deep into the playoffs, and they're running up against some powerhouse schools. I mean, some of the best teams in the state are going up against Princeton. And every year I just, I want our team. I want a team from our area to get that win. So every year I'm hoping that Princeton can do it because, they're the team that's been making it the furthest, in our area. So it's fun football to watch out there for sure.
Yeah, they're a fun team to follow kind of from afar from, where we're located. But, we normally see them once or twice a year and probably a little bit more than that now moving forward with kind of the realignment of the league. But yeah, like you said, it seems like every year, they go 9-0, 8-1, they're double digit wins by the end of the season. And we talk about it each year at the end of the year too, where like the North bracket in 3A is always such a killer. And you see the teams that they have like lost to in the playoffs have been, elite programs in the state where you mentioned Montini there, IC Catholic in the past. I think they played them into overtime a couple years ago.
They played Byron one year. Yeah, right. IC Catholic. Yeah. The who's who of big time football in Illinois.
It'll be again this year where I think they're going to have, I think they're a pretty heavy favorite on that side of the league. And I think, the best team of the 12 teams in the league overall. But when you get to the postseason for them, again, we know it's going to be kind of the murderer's row in the North and 3A, where when we get to the quarterfinals, it's going to be a Byron or a Montini or, whoever it might be. But they are, they've kind of become a machine over the past, 6-7 years with Coach Pearson, just year in and year out. And I saw the notes you shared with me on them that Coach Pearson sent to you guys. It's like 70 kids out for football. I mean, that is really impressive when you talk about, what kind of the state of high school football is at some schools. I mean, nowadays, like 70 kids is a ton. And I think, and we might get into this later too, but like in terms of high school football at the small school level, numbers are so important to be able to build a program, I think, and to have 70 kids out is just incredible. We know they have the quality of players for sure back, but quantity too is really important. I think should be another pretty fun and special year for Princeton.
Yeah, I feel like I say it every time we start talking about Princeton, but I think it's always important to bring up that, before Ryan Pearson got there, the consistent high-end winning, it wasn't happening year in and year out at Princeton. They had, marks, every couple years or every 5 years where they had a really good team that was going to make a playoff run or be in the playoff picture, but it wasn't consistent. And what Ryan Pearson has come in and done consistently, and every year you're talking about a new name that's, taking over our, podcast we're talking about every week. That's impressive that I mean, sure, it's athletes that he's getting in the right positions, but he's doing something right out there because they're doing a great job. And this year, depending on if you're on their side or not on their side, you either love it or hate it that they return 8 on offense and 7 on defense. Opponents are going to hate that because it's the same team you saw last year, essentially. They got to love it out there in Princeton. There's a lot of familiar names here.
Well, that's the thing that we talk about with Princeton a lot too, especially over the past few years, where some of like the really elite level players that they've graduated, you're like, okay, well, they'll take a step back. And like you said, you look and it's like, nope, they have 8 offensive starters back and I think 7 starters back on defense. And it's like the big names, right? Like Noah Laporte's back, who's a Division I football player. The Etheridge kid, Casey Etheridge, ran for over 2,000 yards last year, I think, or around 2,000, and like 29 or 30 touchdowns. Quarterback is back. It's just is like, they're going to be a load again. And I just think, especially early on with all that talent they have back, I mean, that's a team that I think should get off to a pretty fast start and just consistently throughout the year. Like I said, when we opened talking about them, I think definitely, I mean, you got to say a heavy favorite on the Mississippi side of the league and overall in the conference. I mean, I don't think, at least coming in, nobody has the amount of talent back that Princeton does. And I think that's, I think pretty fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, the skill positions you named are back. Three offensive linemen, Anthony Vujanoff, Rhett Pearson, and Kate Odell, all back to anchor that offensive line. So, it's skill positions combined with being strong up front. And here you go. It's a lot of the same offense you saw last year, which is crazy to think, for as good as they were a year ago. On the defensive side of the ball, Kate Odell will be on that line. You'll have Arthur Burden at linebacker, Common Green at linebacker, Ace Christensen, Ian Morris, Noah Laporte as a DB, and Will Lott will play a corner. So, a lot of those athletes going both ways, but, really effective on both sides of the ball.
Yep. It's like kind of like a broken record, I feel like, when you talk about them, and you just know when you play them, it's going to be tough. And I think, over the past few years, like I think I've seen them twice over the past 2 seasons, and it's everything. They're so physical and they're so fast, and it just is, everything you want in like a small school football team or program year over year. I just feel like they have. And another great team on tap for the Princeton Tigers in 2024. And I love the atmosphere at their games too. Princeton's always a fun place to go watch a high school football game. I like when they stripe the end zones.
Yep.
Great atmosphere. And, they've had a lot to cheer about, obviously, in the past, 6 or 7 years, like we've been talking about.
Yep. It's a lot of fun out there, especially the later you get in the year. But even, that Kewanee Princeton game, the rivalries, it's always fun to be at. So, we've talked about it. Ryan Pearson talks about, the biggest keys is relying on that core of experience, returning on both sides of the ball. They have that experience. He says, what they want to do better maybe is take care of the ball. There were some key moments throughout the season. He didn't think they did the best job of that. So I think, again, that comes with that experience, right? Like the more you've done it, the more reps you have, the less likely you are to make mistakes. I think, as we've said, I think this Princeton Tiger team is once again in a great position to lead the Mississippi side. Let's keep moving along. The Hall, Spring Valley Hall, the Red Devils have a new head coach, Logan Larson. I want to give a shout out, appreciate him reaching out to me. I didn't have his email address, but he was able to somehow see that we had the preview form out. He tracked it down, he filled it out and got it back to us. So I appreciate that. So first year head coach here for Hall. We talked a little bit about it to Kevin Hieronymus from the Bureau County Republican. He's familiar with him. He had talked to Coach Larson a little bit. So you can go back and listen to that episode. He talks a lot about Hall football. But a year ago, they were 3-6. They returned 9 on offense, 8 on defense. So similar story to Princeton, a lot of guys back. But, this Hall team has something to prove because they were 3-6 a year ago. So they got some wins to grab if they want to, gain off that experience. Looking down the list of some of the names that Coach Larson gave to us, listed a bunch of guys just as athletes. So I think there's, they're still trying to find where they best fit in. And that could be a really good thing, right? If you got a bunch of guys who are versatile, who knows where they fit in best. Jack Jablonski listed as an athlete, Braden Curran, Aiden Redcliffe, Jack Curran as well. And a handful of those guys are juniors. Also, Dylan Glenn listed as the quarterback. He's a junior. So, a handful of talent here that's still kind of on the younger side of varsity football for a first-year head coach. Maybe that means there's something to build upon this year and the following year.
Yeah, I think for Coach Larson, I think that's important too, where I know Hall was obviously very young last year. And again, this year it looks like for them. And I think it kind of works well. I know he's a first-year head coach and a new head coach too. We're coming in where a lot of those kids where he's going to build with this year, there'll be a lot of familiarity, obviously. That'll be built in with that when you move to, year 2 and year 3 down the line as he tries to build the program. I know they haven't had a ton of success recently, but I know you guys talked about it with Kevin Hieronymus. Hall's a really proud football tradition that they have. So I think, if you can kind of start get things rolling in the right direction, you can get the buy-in, I think, pretty quickly there just because of the pedigree of the program that they have. And they're kind of an interesting team to watch too, because I feel like coming in, you never know with a new coach, what things are going to really look like until you see them on the field. So, you mentioned there, I think 9 starters on one side of the ball, 8 on the other. There's talent there, I think, but whether you can put it together and get kind of comfortable with the new systems will be the keys for them, I feel like.
Yeah, he talks about, not just building a new culture, but also, physically building a new offense and a new defense they've installed this summer. As a new head coach, he's installing the things he likes and the things he wants to see on the field. So that's a learning curve here. but he likes the experience they have. He's hoping that, that experience can mature quickly. He says that depending on how fast they grow up, it kind of dictates how well this team does. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If the experience can be there, but you got to kind of get on the field and really kind of prove it. So I think that'll be kind of interesting to follow along with this Hall team. And like every team, they got to build some depth. They got to stay healthy. That's the key to a lot of these teams that we're going to talk about. Moving down the way, Monmouth Roseville head coach Jeremy Adolphson returns this year. They were 6-5 a year ago. They won a first round playoff game, lost in the second round to Princeton. I give credit to Jeremy here because he not only gives me the notes, he gives the best details of almost any coach that we talk to.
Him and Coach Johnston at Sherrard both do a great job with that. Really good.
We'll get to Coach Johnston's notes in a little bit, but I almost feel bad that, sorry, Jeremy, I'm not going to be able to read everything you put down here.
All 22 of your players, yeah.
I need a whole Monmouth Roseville podcast just for that, which maybe Coach would like. I don't know. We'll talk about that. But no, a couple guys we're familiar with here. Andy Myers, a quarterback last year. He's a senior this year, over 500 yards rushing, 500 yards passing as a junior. Calls him a tough, physical, great leader for this team. So you love that, right? That's a great building block as a quarterback position. Nick Houston is back as a running back, primarily as a blocker as a sophomore. This year, they think he'll be, getting more integrated into things. You also have Peyton Thompson, a running back who is 8 yards shy of 1,000 rushing as a junior. He's their best big play threat, so he'll be a guy to watch for on the field for sure. They have a handful of linemen here. Jeremy says this is the most experienced, biggest, strongest team we've had in my 14 years at Monmouth Roseville. To me, that says a lot because a lot of years I feel like Monmouth Roseville has a pretty big, pretty good, powerful line play team. For this one to be the best, that's high praise.
Yeah, I always say, like, when they come on the field, like when I see them the first year cheer, I'm like, holy smokes, these guys passed the eye test. I mean, up front, they're always huge, it feels like. And last year it was the same thing. And a lot of their guys up front are back this year. And Monmouth Roseville is a team for me that I'm very high on this year. I mean, I really like the Thompson kid running back, and he does a great job in the secondary for them too. You mentioned Nick Houston. I know for him last year, I think he had 8 sacks. I mean, that's a ton in a high school football season, 8. And, I think for them, without a doubt, like it's going to be up front where they'll, find their success, where they're a team that they're not going to throw the ball a lot. They're going to kind of want to line up and just run it right at you over and over again. And I think with the type of talent and physicality they have up front, I mean, I think they can find a lot of success with that this year. They've got the mix too of a couple of decent athletes at the skill positions, where as long as they can, keep like Thompson healthy, they should have a pretty, I think, successful year. And like I said, I think pretty big things for them this year. I'm on the Titan bandwagon, Coach Adolphson.
Here we go. Well, let's read through. Mitch and I always joke that linemen don't get their names called out enough. So if Jeremy's going to give them the praise, let's go through the list here. Junior Evan Dono, Brody Dodd, Lucas Eiler, some of the guys there to watch for on the line. And Landon Angelo, most physically gifted, 6'3", 290, very good feet. He's the newest guy to the group. So you have that experience along with some, young talent here. It's exciting for Monmouth Roseville. Similar names on the defensive side of the ball. But Jeremy's excited about this experience like we talked about. He says their biggest thing this year, limit big plays. That they may not have the fastest kid on the field, so they have to contain teams as good as they can when those other teams have that speed. They want to generate better pass rush consistently against those teams as well. So things to follow for here. This is the 20th season of Titan football. So since they've, combined together, and he said that, the history they're chasing, they want their first outright conference title. They had a 3-way tie in 2018, and they want a 10+ wins in a season. So a couple things they're pushing for. And like we talked about, hey, you're on that bandwagon. This, this could be a year for big things for this Titan squad. So follow them for sure. Hey, you just gave a shout out to Brandon Johnston for great notes. Well, here we go. Let's get into them. Sherrard Tigers, Brandon Johnston, head coach, 3-6 a year ago. But we talked about it at the end of the year. That 3-6 record is a little deceiving because, there were some really close losses that you felt like they were inches away from maybe a much different record. You saw them a lot last year, so let's start there, and then we'll get into what they got here.
Well, the past 2 seasons for them have been, similar, where I know Coach Johnson's first year back in 2021, they went 0-9 and a lot of games were lopsided losses. But even in that second year where they went 1-8, I mean, they were competitive, I think, 7 of the 9 games where they lost a ton of games by 1 score or by 10 or less points, And last year was kind of a similar story where they go 3-6, but if you look closer at some of their results, like Newman Central Catholic, they played them to, I believe it was a 1-score game. I think they lost to them by 6 points. And that was a game where they turned it over 3 times, or if they could have held on the ball, I think they potentially could have beat them on the road. They were leading Rockridge with, less than 2 minutes left in the game and weren't able to hold on. So those are 2 really quality programs that they could have potentially beat early in the season, but weren't able to hold on to beat them.
Didn't they fall short like a 1-possession game to start the season against Kewanee?
And Kewanee too, 28-21. Yeah. And that's another game where they actually recovered an onside kick with like a minute and a half left, down by 7, but one of the guys was offsides on the kickoff team. And, just as like that. And then they played Erie Prophetstown close. I think lost to them by like 12. And that was the week when it was pouring. And Sherrard last year obviously was a team that passed. And that kind of negated what they were able to do offensively. Yeah. So it was just a season where it was kind of, I guess, about missed opportunities where they're so close to getting over the hump. And I think football is one of those sports where it's so hard to turn things around and fully get back over the hump. And last year they were close, and, we'll get into this year's team in a moment, but I think this year there's potential for them to be really competitive again and try to get to that 5th win for the first time in 15 or 16 years, I think. And there's a nice nucleus of kids. They're going to look a lot different, I think. But I think Sherrard definitely still continues to move up and progress in the right direction. Coach Johnson does a great job. He's got a great staff. And I think people should be very confident and happy with the progress they're making.
Refresh my memory. This is a little bit of a different look in their division, right? So they were aligned. I mean, the divisions kind of shuffled a little bit. Yeah, so they'll see some teams that are different this year.
Correct. So the divisions, which we didn't mention, but like they shifted them this year. Last year, it was basically just East and West. This year, with kind of the realignment, they've gone back to it's enrollment based. So the 6 biggest schools with the enrollment are the Mississippi side. The 6 smallest are on the Rock side. So Sherrard, a part of the Mississippi side. So yeah, like that's a team where that last year they didn't play Mendota or Hall. They're now on the same side of the league as them. They also didn't play Princeton last year, so they'll play them now. So that, and then they did play Monmouth, Roseville, and Kewanee last year. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a new look schedule for them. But like I said, I think that like last year, I mean, I think the divisions are pretty balanced, I think, and it's for them to win 5 games. They're going to have to play well to get to the playoffs, but I think there's a path for them without a doubt when you look at their schedule.
Well, let's look through what they got here. 7 return on offense, 6 return on defense. The name that, we're going to talk about right away, Carter Brown. He's listed at wide receiver. I think there was some talk about he's such a dynamic athlete that can he play quarterback? Like, I don't know. I'm not a head football coach. So, I'll trust that his best, most utilized weapon is to be at a wide receiver position. Certainly he showed that the last 2 years. So he's back. Garrett Woodward will also be a wide receiver along with Brody Bender and Zach Knox. On the line, Dom Watts and Grady Steele. A couple names to watch for there. Coach Johnson said they lost a big senior class last year with a lot of experience and a lot of production. But, you still return Carter Brown, who's one of the best athletes on the football field any night that they step out there. So I think that's a huge piece. That's a great start. And I like what Coach Johnson's able to do with this team. And I think, they'll be ready to play some good football this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Brown there, and he's a real joy to watch. He's such a good athlete in every sport. He's a super, like in basketball, he's such a great defender. I love watching him play defense in basketball, but football wise, the stuff he's done as a receiver the past 2 years has been really special. Now, from what I've heard, and this isn't like confirmed by anybody, but like last year, they weren't sure who their quarterback was going to be next year. I've heard that he potentially will be their quarterback. I don't know if that's what they're going to do.
Okay.
I guess there's like 2 schools of thought there. One, you have your best player touching the ball every play now if he is the quarterback, which is good. But like the one issue is he can't throw it to himself. and what he can do down the field is really, really special.
Yep.
And like I talked about at the beginning when we started to talk about Sherrard, they'll look a lot different than they did last year, because when they were coming into last season, you knew everybody at every skill position who it was going to be. And the question mark was what their offensive line was going to look like. This year, I think their strength will be up front. They have 4 starters from last year back, and probably the best lineman on their roster last year is Grady Steele, who didn't play because he had kind of an unfortunate knee injury at the beginning of the season. So he never played. I think he was an all-conference selection up front as a sophomore a couple years ago. So he's back. So up front, I think they should be pretty strong. And then this year, outside of Brown and then Woodward, who you mentioned had a solid year last year as a junior, a lot of those kids that'll be playing, filling in a receiver and running back, or, new faces. So I know like Brody Bender is a solid athlete. He plays basketball too, came out for football for the first time last year as a junior. Lane Luxmore is a kid who played a little bit as a freshman last year, a really good athlete. He played running back really fast too. So for them, it's all about who's going to step up on the outside. Cause I think on the inside, they should be pretty solid up front this year.
Yeah. I'm interested to see, how this plays out for them. We'll talk maybe at the end of this division, some of the matchups to watch, but this is one of those teams you talked about. Like, there's some games along the way that are going to be very pivotal. Like you said, there's a path to 5 wins, but there's some games that are going to be really critical. We'll get into that in a minute here.
Right. And just one more thing about Sherrard, they're very well coached. Coach Johnson has done a great job. He had a great run at Ann Weathersfield. He's done such a good job, at Sherrard, kind of building that program back up. His staff's great. I was around them basically the whole year last year, and they do a really, really good job. So they'll be in games without a doubt.
Yep, for sure. All right. Couple more teams here to cover on the Mississippi side of things. And then I should have told you at the beginning, you're going to have to make a prediction. Put yourself on the line here.
Yeah. Okay. I love predictions. We're going to be doing that all year. We'll talk about that later too, maybe.
All right,
yeah,
for sure. All right. So Mendota, Keegan Hill, head coach Keegan Hill, last season, a tough 1-8. They returned 9 on offense and 8 on defense. So it's funny. A lot of these teams we're calling out, they got a good chunk of guys coming back from almost everybody we've talked about. So Braden Freeman had 26 catches at wide receiver for 326 yards. Keegan Beats had 14 catches for 228 yards on the season. Aiden Tillman will be at quarterback. Gabe Vallejo, a 3-year starter at offensive lineman. Angel Serrano and Joe Stewart will also be on the offensive line. On the defensive side of the ball, you return Gavin Evans, who had 66 tackles at linebacker. You also return Corbin Farrar, who had 41 tackles. So there's a handful of production here. It's just a matter of, translating that into wins.
Right. And for them last year, I know, like you said, 1-8, not a great year win-loss wise, but when we talk about with Hall too, when you have that level of kids back in your starting lineup, I mean, there's familiarity with what you're running and probably a little bit easier to get things rolling. Like when you talk about summer workouts or starting off in practice here in August 12th, I think next Monday is when things get going with everybody. But when you look at their results from last year, I think 6 of their 8 losses were by 40 or more. So, in terms of like closing the gap with that talent you have back, you think you can get a little bit closer. But when you kind of look at the teams they're going to be competing with on that side of the league, Princeton elite, Monmouth Rose will be really good. We'll get to Kewanee in a moment. They should be good. I think Sherrard's solid. I think the TRAC is a solid league this year. And for Mendota, for them to, be more competitive, I think they're going to have to take a pretty big step forward, I would say, probably in 2024.
Yeah. In talking back and forth with head coach Keegan Hill, through our preview forms and just different times throughout the season, I like the culture that he's created there at Mendota. A few years ago, they had a team that was, on the winning side of things and doing really well. And that's exciting stuff. And he really, he's talked about it in his preview form about he really likes the game day experience for everybody involved, players and fans. They have turf there. The walk down, they've added into their kind of culture and their game day rituals. They do some cool stuff. You made the trip there, I think, once, haven't you?
I was there last year when the Orion Chargers took on the Mendota Chargers. Yeah, it's a beautiful facility. They had a beautiful gym too, by the way, because they hosted the boys basketball sectional a few years ago that Rockridge played in. But Yeah, their football facility is amazing. Like the press box is super nice. They've got the field turf, as you mentioned, and like you said, kind of when they walk the field, they come down a hill, which is kind of similar to Mercer County, which I
Okay.
thought was pretty cool. But yeah, like that place, it's not a fun drive from a Ligo, I'll say that, but it's beautiful. Like it's one of the nicer, high school football facilities you'll see around. So yeah, it's a fun place to watch a game for sure. In Mendota. So I agree with what Coach Hill said. The atmosphere and kind of just the game day experience there is pretty top notch.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing we kind of talked about the experience they have coming back. How does it translate to wins? And he talks about multiple young players returning after that challenging season. And now he's expecting that growth as a team, as an overall unit, getting multiple young players to earn that experience last fall to now build on that, build on their strengths. He thinks a positive summer session will improve their chances. So hopefully things are going well for them right now, building into when, the season gets up and going here. But, the Trojans looking to rebound there. So one more team to cover in the Three Rivers, Mississippi. That would be the Kewanee Boilermakers head coach, Matt Taylor. Last season, 8-2. And they return a handful of names that we've talked about. Starting off, Alex Duarte, running back, linebacker, had almost 800 yards, 11 touchdowns, 64 tackles on defense. First team all-conference player both ways. He's a name we talked about last year. He's a name we'll talk about a lot this year for sure. That's a good anchor to bring back.
Yeah, I mean, I remember last year watching him play. I would say he's probably the most physical runner in the league. I mean, between the tackles, I mean, he's tough to bring down. And you mentioned him defensively as a linebacker too. I mean, when you go first team all conference both ways, running back, linebacker, that's a pretty stout athlete. And to bring a kid like that back is important because, the quarterback they lost, Brady Clark, was a phenomenal, football player, athlete at Kewanee, where they're going to miss a lot of his production. He's a kicker too and the punter. I mean, he was I think he was first team all conference last year, like
everything.
Returner, kicker, punter, quarterback, defensive back. It's like, man. But so losing a kid like that hurts, of course. But like with Duarte back, and I think their top three receivers all return this year too. I'm not sure who will be playing quarterback, if it's one of those receivers or if it's a new kid that'll be under center for them. But that they're a program too, similar to Princeton, where I feel like you always know their numbers are going to be really, really strong at Kewanee. Last year they had a lot of kids out. I'm sure this year the same thing. And they always seem to have really solid athletes at that school too. So I think Kewanee, kind of similar to Monmouth Roseville, where we talked about Princeton, a heavy favorite. I think Kewanee and Monmouth Roseville kind of in a similar tier underneath them, where when they play should be a pretty interesting result. Because I think Kewanee, has the potential to have a pretty solid year again this year.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Matt Taylor and the way he leads that program. Obviously, you saw the success on the field a year ago, so it's easy to translate that he's doing a good job. But I hear things off the field, just the way he leads the program, the way he's kind of building kids up and building the program, and that's good to hear. The receivers you mentioned, Ben Taylor, Devontae Jordan, and Colson Wellgate, all back after producing a year ago. So that should help. But again, the question mark is who's at quarterback. We don't know for sure. But with the foundation of Duarte at running back and those wide receivers, I think that's a great starting point for Kewanee for sure. And we got to mention here, so we have a rivalry shirt for Kewanee and Princeton too. So they play for a trophy. It's like the trophy in the area. I mean, it's a big old thing. It's heavy. It's cool. I love going to that game. So we got 2 t-shirts available right now because, of course, we play no favorites. We got both sides. We have the trophy belongs in Kewanee shirt, and we also have the trophy belongs in Princeton shirt. So head out to X. You can find the link to the Breedlove store. Pick up your merch before the game, before the big rivalry game. I'm excited. I hope people wear them out to games. That'd be cool to just kind of create that excitement and create that atmosphere. So, all right, well, let's start looking through before we make predictions. Look through the schedules here if you got them pulled up, and let's see what games stand out to you. Obviously, Princeton Kewanee, that's a game we talk about every year, especially when both teams are playing at a pretty consistently high level over the last, handful of years. It's been fun to watch. What other games stand out to you?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, in terms of like the divisional games on that side, I think Princeton Kewanee is a big one. Princeton Monmouth Roseville, of course, will be a very important game. I think like Sherrard's games with Kewanee and Monmouth Roseville will be important too in terms of like kind of
Yep.
jockeying for playoff positioning. And for Monmouth Roseville too, same thing when they play Kewanee and Sherrard. I think are their big games. Obviously Princeton too, but I think Princeton should be a pretty heavy favorite in those games. And then when you look at like kind of the crossover games, like for Monmouth Roseville, their game with Mercer County week 1 is super interesting, I think. And Sherrard too, they play Mercer County week 2. That's a huge game for both of those teams. And we'll talk about Mercer County later. But in terms of like getting to the playoffs, I think Sherrard and Mercer County, the team that loses that week 2 game, will have kind of a much tougher road to getting to the postseason. So I'm excited for that game for sure, at least early.
Yep. One game.
Princeton Rockridge, Princeton Newman right off the bat too. Princeton,
those are huge.
Week 1, Princeton Rockridge week 2. Well, when you look at Princeton's schedule, I was looking at when we were talking about them. I mean, they go Newman, Rockridge, Sherrard, Kewanee, Monmouth, Roseville. I mean, that's a pretty solid weeks 1 through 5 when you look at who they're going to be playing right away.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, absolutely. So that, this Princeton team we've talked up, they'll have to earn it. That's that's kind of a gauntlet to start the year. Here's one game that's kind of off the radar that I think is interesting to me. Spring Valley Hall and Mendota play each other to start their divisional games.
Yeah. Yep.
So they'll have two, the crossover games, but then when you really get into divisions play, they play each other. I think that's an interesting one to who comes away with that win and builds that positive momentum, right? Obviously, first year head coach in Logan Larson at Hall, and then Mendota on the other side with Keegan Hill trying to rebuild after a 1-8 season with that experience coming back. I think that's a game that's maybe under the radar, but it could be big for one of those teams to build some positive momentum heading into division play. So,
yep, I agree. And then Hall the next week in week 4 plays Sherrard. That's another one of those games. And then week 5, Sherrard and Mendota play. So like right there, all those games. Obviously in football, all 9 weeks are super important. Yep. So you kind of like go through every week and be like, yeah, that's a game for that team. And so is that one. So yeah, like we said at the top of the show, a lot of really intriguing games on both sides of the league this year. I'm really excited to cover the TRAC in 2024.
That's why I love it. Like we talked the same thing in the Northwest Upstate Illini episode where it's like, there are so many good games and good programs. It's like somebody's going to have to lose these games. Right. And it's like, I love it. Like you said, all 9 weeks are so important. So, all right. It's the almighty prediction time. Okay. We lay our thoughts on the line. Mitch and I didn't used to do this a few years ago, but then last year we kind of tiptoed our way into making preseason predictions. And, we got some people kind of calling us out along the way, and that's fun too. That's fine.
I love that. Love it. Call me out too.
So, all right. Well, here we go. I'll default guest first. So who is going to win?
Get mad at me first. Yeah.
Who is going to win the Mississippi side of the Three Rivers?
I will say Princeton. That's not really going out on too big of a limb, but I just think like we talked about it with them, the amount of talent they have back. I mean, it's rare like a high school football team brings back that type of production, especially like skill wise offensively. I mean, it's really impressive when you look at the numbers they have back with, like we said, Laporte and Etheridge, and then like Ace Christensen, another running back who played a lot for them. I mean, they're just they're a machine, and they're going to be super fun to watch this year. And I think they will probably go 9-0, I would think. But and I think for sure they'll win the Mississippi side of the league.
I will cut the drama and I will agree with you, but I'll toss it back. Let's make it a little more interesting.
Okay.
Who's in second place in this division?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think there are a few options for that.
Yep.
But I said earlier I was high on Monmouth Roseville, so I will say Monmouth Roseville will finish second in the league.
Man, you kind of stole my thunder because
okay.
I think it could, but
it
that's
could be,
okay.
Right? Yeah.
It could be Sherrard. It could be Kewanee, and it Monmouth Roseville. I think those three are right in the mix. And again, we've said it; those are going to be great games to watch.
Yep.
It's no fun to agree. It's not.
I know. We need to. Yeah, I know. It's no fun.
It's not the ESPN banter that's contrived and
right.
So we're not getting on top of chairs and arguing with each other. But I will say I agree.
Like we said earlier, Monmouth Roseville up front really strong, and I think that's so important. So I kind of lean with them when what they have back up front. Yep. It could be pretty good, especially early on.
And as my buddy Kyle Kampmeyer from NUIC football always reminds me that, if people don't like what you say, then they can go ahead and prove you wrong. And then we'll take it. We'll talk about you when you win. So there you go. All right, let's take a quick break here, and then we'll jump into the Rock side of the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. We'll be right back. The View from the West Player of the Week is brought to you by Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. You can check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com, or shoot Cal Breedlove an email at calbreedlove@gmail.com.
This is Dan Pearson of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Our FCA team of staff, board, and volunteers is pleased to support View from the West with Greg and Mitch. Our Northwest Illinois FCA team is 3 teams in 1, serving coaches and athletes in the Three Rivers, Northern Illinois, and Greater Peoria areas, all with schools covered by View from the West. For more information, email me at danpearson@fca.org. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
The Quad City's first and only fantasy football show, For Fantasy's Sake, has you all covered when it comes to all of your fantasy football needs. The guys come to you live every Sunday morning during the football season from 10 to 11:30. They've got the best analysis, rankings, DFS, and gambling advice between the Rock and Mississippi Rivers. So tune into For Fantasy's Sake every Sunday during the football season from 10 to 11:30 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube.
Hey, this is Brett Bielma, the head coach of the Fighting Illini from Prophetstown, Illinois. You're listening to the View from the West podcast.
Welcome back. And Ty, how cool is that? We get a shout out from the head coach of the Fighting Illini, Brett Bielema. Proud to be from Prophetstown, Illinois. I thank the University of Illinois for, and Coach Bielema for doing that. It's really cool to hear.
A Prophetstown prophet, right?
That's right. That's right. So if we're
really cool.
If we're hearing from Coach Bielema, we got to start with his alma mater, the co-op that now he's not the Prophets anymore, but the co-op that is now the Erie Prophetstown Panthers. Head coach Tyler Whitebread had the Panthers at 3-6 a year ago. They returned 5 on offense, 7 on defense. You said you were on the Monmouth-Roseville bandwagon for the Mississippi side. I may be jumping on the Erie Prophetstown bandwagon because they got an athlete that I became aware of last year. People need to know about Dimitri Larson, the running back out there. Do you remember the end of the Orion game a year ago?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was one of the best games of the year last year. And they were 0-5 at that point. And what a battle they put on that night.
And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, he made a huge 3rd down conversion to keep the game alive. He then on the next play scored the touchdown, I believe maybe as time expired. And then they went for 2.
There was no time on the clock, yeah.
And then they went for 2, and he scored the 2-point conversion to win the game. And I remember texting with Coach Whitebread afterwards, and he's like, Dimitri Larson is a kid to watch. He's a game changer. You saw it in that game. So sorry, Orion Charger fans, close your ears for that part, I guess. But it was such an amazing finish to that game. And to see this kid doing it, he had 627 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, 402 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he really was, a dynamic weapon doing it on the ground and catching passes. Keegan Winkler is at quarterback. You also have Connor Keegan at a wide receiver. Had 258 yards and a touchdown a year ago. On the opposite side of the ball, Dimitri Larson will be an athlete for him on defense. Amen Barron at linebacker, Gavin Adams and Jack Hockaday also at linebacker. So a few pieces there. Overall, Coach Whitebread likes the team speed that they bring back. He says they got some returning key starters that'll be important to them. And he thinks, overall just improving their situational football, just knowing what to do in the situations, when to do it. I think that experience will come away from that. Also, creating more takeovers on defense and being explosive on offense. Obviously, having Larson will help with some of that. So this is a team I'm watching out for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you that they're a team that last year really kind of put things together in the second half of the year, where, like I mentioned a moment ago, they started 0-5, but And I know they were able to rattle off some wins where they beat Orion, like you said, at the last minute. They beat Sherrard, who was still kind of clawing for a playoff spot at that point. They beat Riverdale last year, too. You mentioned Larson. He's a really good player. Keegan Winkler, who will be their quarterback this year as a junior, and he started a few games for them as a freshman because of some injuries they were dealing with that year. So he has a little bit of experience playing at the varsity level already, and he's played a lot of varsity basketball too. So he's a kid who's been used to the varsity speed of games, I guess. Connor Keegan, same thing. He's played a lot of varsity basketball his first 2 years in high school. He played a lot for them last year as a sophomore in football too. He's a good athlete, kind of on the outside. So they're a team that is, I think, a little bit scary for teams on that side, where maybe coming into the season, people aren't talking a lot about Erie Prophetstown. But I agree with you, Greg, that that's a team that I think it will be in the mix for things again in terms of like trying to get to the playoffs. They're a team that'll be tough to beat, I think, night in and night out.
People aren't talking, but we're talking about them.
We're talking about them. Yeah, right. And Coach Bielema is too.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, all right. Sterling Newman, the Comets, Mike LeMay, a year ago, 5-3. They lost to Rova Williamsfield in the first round of the playoffs, 28-14. They returned 3 on offense, 5 on defense. So not as many, not as the numbers that we've seen in some other teams, but some of the names they do bring back, I think, are names that are going to have a huge impact on the field. Evan Bushman at quarterback, Daniel Kelly at fullback and halfback. Literally, Coach LeMay said, does everything. That was his description. And I agree. He talked about him last year as a junior, seemed like a difference maker for him then, is a difference maker for him now. George Youngerman at wide receiver and also just an athlete. We called out his name a few times last year, and Brady Williamson at running back. On the defensive side of the ball, Cody McBride on the defensive back, Daniel Kelly at linebacker, Briar Ivy at linebacker, Joe Oswald at linebacker, Ryan Partington at the defensive line. What I think is interesting, so I read the name McBride and I read Ivy, and I saw that this is a tight-knit group. Coach LeMay said 5 seniors are the last of their families to go through the football program. They had older siblings as a part of state championship teams. Because as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember covering a McBride on the football team. I remember covering an Ivy on the Newman football team. And here they are, siblings. That can be a huge factor, right? I mean, you went to a Mercer County program that sees the same thing. And that's a big deal, right? Where you saw it walking the sidelines as a little kid, and then you get a chance to do it on a Friday night. I think that's all part of that like culture building, and you want to be the next group to win, right?
Yeah, and Newman, I mean, obviously it goes without saying their tradition is so proud there when it comes to football. And you mentioned the Kelly kid who Coach LeMay was talking about. When he sent their stats, 115 tackles last year. I mean, that's
jeez, yeah.
So that's a kid. And I know their defense was so strong last year. We talked about it. It was like they felt like they forced like 2 or 3 turnovers every week.
Oh, yeah.
And they beat Rock Island last year, which was a great game and just kind of a crazy result when you look at the enrollments of those 2 schools. But, when you talk about Newman, you talked about their quarterback too, Evan Bushman. Now, it's not like the Newman of old with what they do offensively. They'll throw the ball a lot more than they have. And I think that's something they're looking to do even more so this year. I think Bushman last year, looking at their stats, threw for over 1,400 yards. That's something that is, for like 10, 20 years ago for Newman, he never would have thrown for 1,400 yards, but he's a kid he'll be a junior this year, pretty solid, like passer. And he's a little bit of a threat to run too. So, it's just kind of weird when you see them play and they don't just line up and hand it off every time. To me, it's still a little jarring when they like line up in the shotgun and everything, but I like what they have, and I think they're a team this year that, like every year, it's not like you're saying anything new, but I think Newman should be pretty solid in football, if you can believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach LeMay said he really likes the athletes he's got coming back. As you said, they have an experienced quarterback, but it's no secret. They need to build more consistency on offense. I mean, defensively, they're there. They're the best defensive team maybe in our area. Forget, conference or school size, maybe in all of our area that we're talking about defensively, Newman is doing what they do. But yeah, they need to do a little bit more on offense. I think the names we talked about will be a big part of that. And also I think another part of it is the more comfortable these guys get and the more Coach LeMay he's a former defensive coordinator, right? So the longer he gets in and I think gets, experienced in setting up this offense, I think that will help too. So we'll see what Newman can do to progress this year. New offensive line, but I got to imagine at Newman, they're going to create that push up front. If they can protect, I think that will help a lot. That just seems like one of those things Newman's going to do well.
Right. Yep. Always solid up front. And it seems like even when they don't want to run it as much as they have in the past, they still, when they need to, they can, pick up yards on the ground. And defensively, like you were talking about, they're always so disciplined, and it seems like they're never out of position. They're always there, and they're always such solid tacklers too. So, the defense will be tested right away, right? They play Princeton in week 1. That'll be the biggest test they'll have with an offensive unit for sure. But I think, again, this year for them, they'll be carried on the defensive side of the ball. I think, like, as good as they play defensively, that'll be kind of tell the tale of their year, I think.
Yep. I think they will be in the mix. We'll make our predictions in the end, but they'll be in the mix here. Another team I think will be in that mix, Rockridge. So let me tell you, this is our second preview that we've released now. I've had Rockridge fans reaching out to me saying they were listening to last year's season preview because they were so excited to hear this year's season preview.
All right, so there we go. We love the Rockets. Come on, man.
So the wait is over. No, I mean, our last year's podcast was great. You don't have to listen to that one anymore. Here's the new one. The preview for the Rockridge Rockets. Sam Graves has them back on the field this year. Last year, they were 9-2. They had a great run. 6 on offense return, 5 on defense. On the offensive side of the ball, Cullen Schweigen, a quarterback, sophomore, really burst on the scene a year ago and became, by the end of the year, as the season played out, became one of their kind of steady, foundation type of offensive players, right? You knew that he was going to get the job done and he was going to be able to lead that offense. Jacob Freiermuth is back at running back. Landon Wheatley, who was a great weapon that connected with Schweigen quite a bit in last year, is back again this year as a senior. Owen Steele at wide receiver. Owen Steele is a junior. Liam Steele is also a junior. Landon Bull was on the offensive line, also listed as a tight end this year. So that's interesting. And Tanner McKeague also as an offensive lineman as a junior. On the defensive side of the ball, you have Landon Bull, an all-stater at linebacker. Jude Finch, Ryan Lower, who I was really impressed with. I believe he was a freshman at the time in a game against Newman, and he ran from across the field and tracked down a guy to create a fumble. It was an amazing play. I remember seeing it, and just that all-out hustle. I love the play. I still remember it. Owen Steele at defensive back. Trevor Dye as a senior at defensive back as well. So tell me about the Rockets, Ty. What do you hear? What do you think?
Well, you talked about Cullen Schweigen there, and I think, like you said, he really progressed so nicely last year, where I know week 1, it was kind of shaky against Newman when they lost that game, but
again, against the Newman defense in week 1. So anyway, we just talked about Newman. So anyway,
I know. And we talked about that with Coach Graves last year too, where he wasn't worried after that performance. Cause he's like, look, this kid last fall was playing against 7th graders, and now he's playing, this Newman varsity defense. And he, progressed so well and matured so well throughout the season. And he's a really just naturally gifted athlete. I think last year he was much better as a runner than as a passer. He still, I think, nearly both rushed and passed for over 1,000 yards, but he's a really high level baseball player, Schweigen is, and he has a really live arm. So I think that when as he progresses and gets older as a football player, he's going to be able to throw the ball too. So I think, the reason I think they're going to be good again, by and large, is because I know they have a very good quarterback, and they're going to have a very good quarterback for this year, next year, and the year after with Schweigen playing. You kind of went down the line of their playmakers on offense. Landon Wheatley's a great athlete. He came back out for football last year, was their leading receiver. The 2 Steels had strong years as sophomores last year for the Rockets. And you mentioned Landon Bull on the offensive side of things too. There were a couple of plays last year. I think they played Monmouth Rose. I think he picked the ball off twice. And seeing him with the ball in his hands, I was like, whoa. I was like, that's a kid that maybe you should think about getting the ball to on offense. He's played offensive tackle the past 3 years, freshman, sophomore and junior year for him. It's crazy he's a senior finally. It feels like he's been playing for like 10 years. But because he's a great basketball player too. He's been an all-stater in basketball, all-state in football. And I think people underestimate the level of athlete he is. Like, obviously he's a very good player, but I don't think people give him the credit as just a pure athlete. I mean, he moves so fluidly and smoothly, where if he does end up playing tight end a little bit, I think, he'll be kind of an exciting player to watch when he gets the ball in his hands. And Rockridge, last year, we talked about them a lot on the defensive side of the ball. I know you guys did too. They were so good against the run all year, and a lot of those guys are back. You talked about Bull, an all-state linebacker. Jude Finch up front was a state champion wrestler last year as a junior. Ryan Lower, I think he cut his hair though. So he's a relative of mine.
Okay.
Right. So my mom's cousin is his dad. And then Lane Luxmore, who I mentioned earlier from Sherrard, is another relative of mine too. But yeah, Ryan, very impressive linebacker. He started for that team as a freshman a couple years ago. And then the defensive backfield too, you mentioned Steele and Dye, and then Wheatley was back there last year. They're a team that I think, will be very good again. I will do the prediction again, but I think they're coming into the season probably the favorite on the Rock side of things in the track. But like Coach Graves talked about, the big question mark for them this year is up front, which is kind of weird to say because they've been so strong up front the past few years, where they graduated a lot of that, especially on the offensive line from last year, where it's going to be interesting. And if Bull doesn't play offensive line, that's another offensive lineman they lost too when you look at it. So it'll be kind of interesting to see where the pieces fit, I guess, to the puzzle up front for them, because I think skill wise, they are about as good as it gets. Not as good as Princeton, but I think if anybody else in the league, their skill position guys are right up there.
So you have, relatives that you called out. Peek behind the curtain. One of my best friends is Landon Bull's dad, Nick. I remember where I was at when Nick Bull called me and said that Landon was born. So, awesome. This goes, so it runs deep, crazy. So
I've got a tidbit on Nick Bull too. So he wears this WRMJ hat he has all the time to games. And when Rockridge beat Princeton a couple years ago in the boys basketball sectional championship, he had me and my dad sign it. So he has a 1-of-1 signed WRMJ hat with me and my dad's signature on it. So.
And if you know Nick Bull and collectibles, man, he will keep that forever. And
I know.
And he will call it out as a 1-of-1. The only. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, okay, getting back to real talk here. Yes, Sam Graves did mention that offensive line play would be something that they would have to, be improving on quickly because they had some holes to fill. So I think there'll be some, work in progress or just getting guys up to speed. But I think, like you said, the offensive, playmakers they have, I think will help offset that a little bit. But this Rockridge team should be a lot of fun to watch. Getting back, kind of closing the loop on Cullen Schweigen, I think one of the most impressive things I saw last year was as a freshman leading his team down the field on the road at an undefeated Morrison team at the time. That's the best game I saw last year. I mean, I think his poise and his, ability to get the ball where it needed to go, like you said, in a situation where you had to rely on your arm in a really tough spot. And he found those plays. And he also, had some guys to hand the ball off to and get the job done. But that was an impressive, not just for the athleticism, but for the poise and the control in the moment. And so that always stood out to me. So he'll be a player to watch for sure. And the guys we mentioned. So yeah, I think Rockridge will be in our discussion here in a few minutes, but we'll get back to it in a minute. Let's keep moving down the way. Riverdale, the Rams 0-9 a year ago. Head coach Guy Derricks got back to me with a bunch of information. And, this is a team that they sat out a year or 2 years ago and they played last year. But obviously after sitting out a year, there's a learning curve, right? There's a lot to pick up, and they struggled. They were 0-9. They returned 9 on offense. They returned 9 on defense. They have Gage Henson at running back. He had almost 600 yards. You also have Kane Beckett, a junior running back and wide receiver. He put up a bunch of yards, catching the ball as a wide receiver, 5 touchdowns. Also had, 5 touchdowns on the ground, 5 touchdowns, receiving. Colton Cruz at quarterback is back again. He's a senior. And then Aiden Sensabaugh, the kicker, he was 8 for 10 at extra points, but he also hit a 47-yarder in a game, which is a school record. I remember we called that out on the podcast a year ago. So, find the highlights where you can get them. And that's huge. That's great. That was a great feel-good story. So they have a couple other guys to watch for. Jackson Fritch and Marcus Bennett, newcomers at guard position as sophomores. On the defensive side, some of the names we already mentioned, Cruz will be a linebacker. Elliot Freeze, Jacob Bastian, Tyler Hassenauer, and Landon Peterson. So a few guys there. But overall, Coach Jerick says they'll be young by varsity football standards, but they do have a lot of experience. And I think it's a lot of valuable varsity experience. Obviously, these kids, took their lumps last year, but working towards, competitive games, being competitive game in and game out. And you never know. Once you get into it, you get a team on their heels, you see what can happen. I really like Coach Derrickson. He really battles with his program, and I hope that they can take that step this year, grab a couple wins, and, get themselves in a positive mindset.
Yeah, I really like Coach Derrick's too, and I think it really says a lot about him as a coach when you talk about how they had to miss a season a couple years ago, and I think a lot of the times when you see a program miss a season, it's like, okay, that might be the end for, football at this school as we know it. And I know, he said, I think in the notes, he's saying 18 kids were out that year. And then just a couple years later, they're hoping to be around 50 this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. An absolutely incredible turnaround. So he deserves a ton of credit for that, to get kids to come out. And look, I mean, you have that many kids out, you have basically everybody back who produced for you last year. I think they're a team and a program that's going to take a big step forward. I don't know, that might not necessarily translate in terms of like a huge improvement on wins and losses, but things are definitely moving in the right direction. I think for sure they'll be a lot more competitive this year than they were last year. So it's great to see, because Riverdale, they're solid in a lot of things athletically. And I think football wise, they can get there. It's been a while, but seeing the buy-in and the stuff he does on social media too, with just like the weight room stuff and the participation, has been really great to see. Just the excitement level around that program, where it would be easy for there not to be any with, how things have been going the past few years, but for him to be able to kind of tap into that, I think is really, really impressive.
Well, and he's a program builder, right? I mean, I don't know how many people on the Illinois side are familiar with it, but in the Quad Cities area, I covered him when he took over Davenport North. So public school in the city of Davenport that had all but dead football program. They were irrelevant for years and years. And he took over that program and he did the same thing. He built numbers, and at first the wins weren't coming, but he continued to build numbers and just get attention to the program and just get kids interested and get kids excited. And eventually they became a program that was winning football games. And that's exciting. And I think that, just building numbers here at Riverdale is a great start. And so we'll see what can happen for them here as they, get back in, and hopefully after last year getting back on the field, this year can maybe be a little more normal. Just, they're ready for the Friday nights and they're ready for the routine of what a varsity schedule looks like. So good luck to the Rams and Coach Derrick. This episode of View from the West podcast is brought to you by Simulation Sports. In addition to golf simulators and batting cages, Simulation Sports provides golf club repair, custom fittings for driver shafts, and even private lessons for golf, baseball, and softball. Whether you're looking for a fun group activity or want to fine-tune your skills and equipment, Simulation Sports has something for everyone. Visit their facility at 400 South Main Street in Monmouth, Illinois, or go to thesimulationsports.com to start playing today.
Shouldn't financial advice focus on you? I can help you plan for your financial future, from protection to saving to retirement. I'm Nate Neighbor, your Modern Woodman representative. Call me at 309-233-2656 or find me on the Modern Woodman website.
Get to know your local Modern Woodman representative to plan for your financial future and learn about valuable member benefits. Modern Woodman of America. Touching lives, securing futures. Securities offered through MWA Financial Services, Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of Modern Woodman of America.
View from the West podcast is also sponsored by the Cupcake Cartel. Gourmet cupcakes that are made to order. Over 40 flavors, including wedding cake, lemon blueberry, strawberry milkshake, snickerdoodle, and Oreo. Perfect for weddings, birthdays, showers, fundraisers, or any event. You can find the Cupcake Cartel on Facebook. We thank them for their support. Let's jump into Orion. Chip Filler and the Chargers 3-6 a year ago. But again, like a lot of teams we've talked about, they return a good number of players, impact players, I should say, and none bigger than Cale Filler at quarterback, over 2,000 yards a year ago, 23 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. So very effective at quarterback. And he's got some weapons around him that are back this year too. I think that there's something to be excited about for the Orion Chargers.
I think so. And they're similar to Sherrard when we talked about like last season. I mean, they were literally 12 seconds away from winning 5 games. You look at the Erie Provincetown game we mentioned. The next week they were leading Sherrard and gave up a touchdown with like 12 seconds on the clock. So, I mean, they were very close to being a team that was into the playoffs last year. And obviously, you know, Cale Filler, I think, is probably the best passer in the league. I mean, you talk about those numbers last year. They throw the ball a lot, and they're going to throw the ball a lot again this year. 2,000 yards, though, in a 9-game season is a ton, and 23 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. The 2 receivers they have back, Jake Bainbridge and Owen Voorhees, both, you know, are really big play threats. 872 yards, 12 touchdowns for Bainbridge last year. He'll be a senior. And then Voorhees, like Filler, is just a junior this year at 40 catches for 765 yards and 8 touchdowns. So I think the thing about Orion, we know that they're going to be able to throw the ball. And I think we know they'll be able to score. The question mark for them, though, arises because I know they're really fighting numbers there. Like their numbers are very low from what I've heard. And the question mark for them, like it was last year, can you run the ball when you need to? And can you get a push up front when you need to? And last year, ultimately, the answer to those questions was no when they needed to. And this year, I think for them to take the next step and get back in to the postseason, they're going to need to do that. And defensively, too, they got to be better than they were last year. I think in their 6 losses, I looked this up, 41 points per game in those 6 losses. So, you know, you're just not going to win games and you're giving up that many points. So again, we know offensively they'll be able to throw it, but it's, can you get stops? Can you get a push up front? That's the key to their season, I think.
On the defensive side of the ball, you look at what could be the difference. Aiden Fisher is back at middle linebacker, 107 tackles a year ago, 5 tackles for loss. You had Max Larson, 27 tackles, 6 passes defended. Jake Bainbridge, Chase Hickson, Jackson Peer, 32 tackles and an interception. Wyatt Steen, who he says has an extremely high motor, which that's kind of what we talked about earlier with Lower, right? Like you love that sort of player, right? That like high energy guy who's always getting after it. So I think there's some names there on defense, but I think what I like about this Orion team is that obviously Cale Filler is a great quarterback, but now he has such a wealth of experience, you know, as a junior, even as a junior, he has so much varsity experience that last year they were so close in those games. If they get some help defensively, can they make that step? You know, can they make that, you know, make that leap? I did joke with Coach Filler that one of the t-shirts we're selling this year just says pass, play action. So it's pass, play action, touchdown, repeat. And I said, Coach, this is your shirt. This is what you need. So
well, I know Cale had a game last year. I think he attempted 53 passes in a game.
Yeah.
So, thing about, I'll say this about if you're going to go watch Orion Charger football in person, get comfortable because those games are going to take a long freaking time, man.
What Chip mentioned in the preview form that he filled out for us is that, you know, we talked about Bainbridge and Voorhees at wide receivers. And he thinks what's important here is that obviously they're going to be threats to catch the ball, but maybe in the fact that if they get attention as wide receivers, you know, play in and play out, maybe eventually that opens some space for Aiden Fisher in the running game. So I think that's something to watch for, that if he can gain some ground just based on the attention that Filler's going to command along with Bainbridge and Voorhees. So I think that's something that, you know, potentially could be. And on the defensive side of the ball, we talked about Fisher and Jake Bainbridge is back. as a 3-year starter on defensive end. And a lot of it comes down to staying healthy, right? Is, finding kids that are, filling in spots as sophomores, but staying healthy because the depth may not be there. So moving along, we have one team left. We're near the end here. One team left. Ty, you've waited all episode to talk about the newcomer. The newcomer, the newest team in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference, Mercer County. It's been a long time that you've been waiting to hear Three Rivers Athletic Conference and Mercer County in the same sentence, and we're here. How excited are you to look through that schedule and see what's coming?
Welcome to the future, man. That's what I tell everybody. But it's great. I think Mercer County, when Rockridge and Orion and Sherrard joined the TRAC, whatever year it was, I might have been in high school at this point. It just felt like it was only a matter of time before Mercer kind of joined. And then once Monmouth Roseville did a few years after that, it really felt like, okay, like Mercer County, the home eventually will be the Three Rivers. And for a while, it seemed like it never was going to happen. But a few years ago, they finally kind of put the wheels in motion, I guess. And then here we are in 2024, 25, the school year where Mercer County finally joins. They're back with kind of their original long-time like local rivals when you talk about Rockridge and Sherrard and Monmouth Roseville and Orion, where for them, I think there's a lot of excitement this year, not in terms of just like necessarily the team, but just like the schedule, right? Like I think people have been waiting for a long time to play Sherrard and Monmouth Roseville and Rockridge and Orion, like we talked about. I mean, when Alito back in the day left the Olympic, I think it's been 18 or 19 years now since Alito / Westmer / Mercer County has played those schools in football.
Yeah,
they played Rockridge once in the playoffs as Mercer County. It was a classic game, double overtime that Mercer County won. They played Orion once in that stretch in the playoffs and lost in a 1-point game, I think, that kind of came down to the final seconds. And then, they haven't played Sherrard or Monmouth Roseville since like 2006, I think, which is crazy. A travesty, I'll even say. But it's really exciting. I mean, there's just a lot of excitement, I think, around finally getting to play those schools again. I am, at least. I know everyone I've talked to around the program and just kind of around the communities that make up the Mercer County School District. A lot of people who maybe haven't been that interested in like high school athletics or high school football the past, X amount of years will come out and say, okay, we're playing Rockridge, I'll be there. We're playing Sherrard, I'll be there. So, exciting times, I think, for them to enter the league.
I think, overall from an outsider, who moved into this area in the early 2000s, I just look at it as it makes sense. It's the right enrollment fit. It's the right geographic fit. I'm glad that it was finally available to them and they were able to make that move. We have a t-shirt that your dad definitely needs to buy. It's the View from the West shirt that says, I still call it the Olympic. There you go.
Oh my God. I need to get one of those too.
So there you go. So, all right, let's get into Mercer County here. Tanner Matlick back as his second year as head coach of the Golden Eagles, 6-4 a year ago. So they return some big names. They return Tannen Whitehall, running back. He's the player that we talked about last year, as an impact player. And now he's probably going to be the go-to guy. Second team all conference a season ago. What did you see from him last year? And what do you think that he can do this year, maybe as the lead guy, as the lead back?
Well, I think for him, like last year, I mean, he was just a sophomore last year, and he's not really necessarily like a very big kid. I mean, he doesn't like wow you in terms of when you look at him on the field, but he's, very shifty, and he's just a good, like, I think hard-nosed football player. Like he kind of, you can just tell the way he moves, the way he plays, he's just kind of a natural football player. He looks good with the ball in his hands. I think for him though, I mean, that's going to be, I don't think it's a secret. That's where the success is going to have to lie for them, especially early on offensively. New quarterback this year, John Baldwin. He's a solid athlete, but, hasn't played at the varsity level yet. He's just a junior. So, as he kind of gets his feet underneath him, I know they play Monmouth Roseville week 1, which is a team that is I think will be very good. So kind of like a trial by fire, I guess, right away, having to play them on the road. Other than that, though, I know, their main receiver they lost from last year, the Frederickson kid, Colby Cox, the quarterback, graduated last year too. Offensively, I think outside of Whitehall, it's kind of a question mark, kind of where the production is going to come from. I think up front is a question mark too. And I know last year for Mercer County, they got just destroyed by like the injury bug. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
Yep.
What was going on with them last year, where this year their numbers are, from what I've heard, a lot like very down from what they were last year. So obviously if that happens again this year, it could kind of really sink them. So hopefully everybody's able to stay healthy. But I think even with the lower numbers, there's a solid nucleus there if they can put everything together. But it's going to be a little more challenging. Obviously, the schedule they're playing is the toughest they've played since they've been Mercer County now in the TRAC, where they're really going to have to kind of earn their way to getting to the playoffs if they want to get to 5 wins. The schedule for them, like I said, is the toughest it's ever been as Mercer County. It's the toughest schedule they've played since they were in the Olympic back in the day. So, you know, and the question for them too, I think, is like, what are they going to look like playing in the Three Rivers, right? Because it is a step up. You know, I don't mean any disrespect to the league they were in, but it just is. You know, there isn't a team like Princeton that they've been playing in the past years, or Rockridge, or even a team like Monmouth Roseville or see this year. So I think for them, how do you fit in at this level is the big question mark. And then defensively, I think that Peyton Sedam is the kid's name, their kind of main linebacker that's back. He'll be a senior this year, kind of anchor them on the defensive side of things. But again, the question mark is like, to the numbers, like, got to stay healthy with everything. So hoping that's able to happen for them. But like I said, you know, if they're able to stay healthy, I think they can be a pretty competitive team in the Three Rivers.
Yeah. I think a year ago, when you look at that Lincoln Land Prairie, you know, the Lincoln Land, where it was the crossover with the Prairie Land teams, I think they ran into, you know, back-to-back weeks, Farmington and Knoxville. And I think those were the legit, those were the real heavy hitters. Yeah. And they faced them in back-to-back weeks. Yeah. And I think that, they were reeling a little bit, and injuries were a part of it, but they were struggling to find themselves. So I guess one of my questions for you, as someone, you talk to, Coach Matlick week in and week out on Sportsline every Saturday. What did you hear from him as far as the progression as a first-year head coach? And I think that they lost in week 1 to United, which I think was kind of a shock because it was only 13. It was 14-6. They only put up 6, only scored 1 touchdown in that game. So I think that was a shock right off the bat. But they were trying to grow and trying to, kind of figure out their system throughout the year. What did you hear from him?
Well, he talked a lot last year about how much he felt he grew as like a play caller, I guess. I think because he calls the offense for them from, week 1 to the end of the season when they, lost in the first round of the playoffs, where the loss, like you said, to United was very surprising. Like, I really was shocked by that when I saw that result last year. But yeah, I mean, and like you mentioned too, the 2 kind of lopsided losses they had back to back with Knoxville and Farmington midway through the year. Like, at that point, people were kind of like, okay, like but they were able to kind of turn things back around. I think that's a credit to him and that staff too, where they didn't allow things to, kind of go off the rails and were able to kind of calm everything down. But, this year, like we said, it's not just Farmington and Knoxville you're going to have to play. You got to play Rockridge and Monmouth Roseville and Princeton later in the year, and Sherrard's solid, and and Orion, Erie, Prophetstown are good teams. Newman, where it's just something they've never had to do before. So I'm just interested to see kind of how they're able to handle that.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting test for them, and I think that you would hope that with a year under his belt and as an off season, to where I think anytime you take over as a first year head coach with a program, I think there's always that first year where it's getting your feet under you, right? Building that foundation. And I think the second year is obviously going to be easier than the first year, but you got to grow. You got to be able to take that step, right? You've built the foundation. Kids should be familiar with everything you're doing now, but you got to take the next step. So I think that, and in this new look conference for them, it'll be interesting to see, where they fall. And
I was just going to say, their first 3 weeks are huge. I mean, because later in the year, they have a stretch where they play Newman, Rockridge, and Princeton weeks 6, 7, and 8 in a row, which those are all going to be games that'll be, challenging to win. But you look at weeks 1, 2, and 3 for them, they go at Monmouth Roseville, home against Sherrard, at Orion.
Yep.
So, I mean, those are games that I think, either slight underdog, slight favorite, or basically right even with the team they're playing, where kind of 3 almost toss-up games right in a row to
Yep.
start the season that'll kind of determine how things are going to go, I think.
You're right. I mean, a lot of their season could be dictated in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
Ty, that's a great segue into the games we're watching for. Look,
I'm a pro.
that's
I'm
exactly.
taking your spot, Mitch. Come on, man.
So where do you go? We just named those 3 for Mercer County, and I think you're spot on. Those are huge games. What else do you see on this side of the conference?
Rockridge Newman, I think definitely week 5. That's Newman, of course, beat Rockridge last year. I think that's a huge game in terms of the conference race for Orion. Like, same thing. Their game with Mercer County is huge, without a doubt. Their game with Erie Prophetstown in week 7 is important too. And then by the time we get to the end of the year, it's going to be kind of a similar thing, I think, as it was last year when Orion played Sherrard, where it's like going to be 2 teams kind of battling to stay in the playoff race. They play week 8. That'll be a lot of fun. We already mentioned, like, when you look at Newman's schedule, their game with Rockridge, I think Newman, Erie Prophetstown's a big game. Newman, Orion. I think too, when you look at this side of the league, when you talk about Mercer County, Erie Prophetstown, Newman, Orion, I think those 4 teams are all kind of similar. I think Newman might be a little bit above the rest of them, but I mean, those 4 teams in the middle of the pack of the league, I say, and Rockridge too. I mean, I think those are all teams that'll really, really play competitive with each other this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of excitement. I agree. I look at a game like Erie Prophetstown and Orion in week 7, and also to kind of follow along with that, Erie Prophetstown, I think in weeks like 1 and 2, you got Kewanee on the road and you got Hall at home. I think one of those 2 games, if you're Erie Prophetstown, you need to win one of those, right? To kind of get that first win in there. And then as your schedule progresses, I think eventually Orion and Mendota are going to be huge games for Erie Prophetstown.
Yeah. And Riverdale plays Mendota week 1 right away, which will be, I know Mendota was the team that Riverdale played the closest last year. So to kind of see where they are right away, I think that's a perfect like week 1 matchup for both teams, really.
Yep.
To kind of see where you're at right away. So, you know, like we talked about at the very beginning of the show today, a lot of very competitive games should be on the slate this year. A lot of evenly matched teams, I think, in the track should make for a very fun year, kind of following week in and week out.
Well, Ty, give a quick plug to WRMJ because you'll be covering a lot of these games and a lot of these teams.
So John Hoshite, our founder, I guess we can say, retired last week after 45 years of great work in local radio. So he's always done covered Aledo / Mercer County.
Yep.
He's going to do one more game this year, which will be Mercer County's home opener week 2 against Sherrard. So that's something I want to plug for sure. John's like a legend in terms of local radio, sports coverage. So really cool that he's going to do one more.
Quick, I'll stop real quick. Just, you know, so people who don't know, like, literally, I mean, what John Hoshite has built at WRMJ, I love it. I think it's remarkable. And what your dad and what you continue to do for local sports coverage, like, I want to pat you guys on the back and give you a shout out here because a lot of small town radio has gone away. And even in my hometown of Ottawa, Illinois, you know, growing up, it was a given that Marquette and Ottawa high schools were both going to have a radio station at every football game, at every basketball game. And that's not a thing anymore. They still get some coverage from the local radio station, but Ottawa's bigger than Aledo, and it's not, the coverage is, you know, kind of dwindling, you know, and they do their best they can, but it's resources and availability. But I give credit to John Hoshite and what he's built and what you guys do out there because it's awesome. It's a great way to keep these games, you know, keep them important and keep them relevant and keep them talked about.
Yep. For sure. Thank you for those kind words. And we'll definitely miss John a lot. So he'll be back for week 2, but we each week, all 9 weeks of the regular season and the playoffs, cover Mercer County, Rockridge, Sherrard, and Orion. So we'll have play-by-play broadcast for all 9 weeks for those 4 schools. This year I'm replacing John doing Mercer County. So that's exciting. My dad is covering Rockridge for us. Eric Hutchins and his son Peyton will be covering Sherrard, and our man Ryan Schistel will be
Ryan Schistel.
Schistel.
Ryan Schistel.
Schistel. Schistel, St. Ambrose University, Greg Armstrong University. He'll be covering the Chargers for us this year.
So I got to give a quick shout out.
I haven't met him in person yet.
Okay. Well, when you do, he's great. He's a great kid. Ryan Schistel, yes, one of my students at St. Ambrose University. He's great. I mean, before I got there, I had already heard like, hey, this kid's only a freshman, but he's jumping right in. He's doing everything. He's gung-ho, ready to go. And he's taken over at St. Ambrose, and he is, like I said, he's motivated. He's knowledgeable. He's going to be great. So Orion fans, you're going to love him. He does a great job. I already told Chip, he's going to be there talking to you after games. So be ready, but
right. Chip is Coach Filler's the best post-game interview you'll ever have. Too.
Exactly. So that's great. That's really exciting. Awesome. Well, what's it mean to you to be stepping into the Mercer County booth? Literally. I mean, I've seen the press box set up. You got your own space there.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I just think, like we talked about when we were talking about their team this year, it just is exciting that for me to get to cover those games and they're playing the local rivals again. Like that's, even when I was in school, it's like me and my friends always talked about, it's like, why in the world are we not playing Sherrard and Rockridge and, these schools that we played growing up? Like, it's not as fun, and it will be more fun now for everybody getting to play the local schools. And I think the environments of the games will be way better. And I'm just excited to be a part of that in a small capacity, obviously, but it's really exciting to get to do that, working at the station. Like I've built such great relationships with people, especially at Rockridge, Sherrard, and Orion, because we cover them, but really around the whole track, everybody's so great in the league. It's going to be exciting getting to see them play everybody. I'm really looking forward to that. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Who's your color commentary?
That is not been determined yet.
Okay.
I figure that out. But I'm sure it'll be someone who's way better than me. So
someone who can analyze, what they're doing. Yeah.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
I love it. All right. Well, the all important prediction is the only thing awaiting here as we wrap up our Three Rivers conference preview. So where are you going on the Rock side of the division here?
All right. So for the conference champion on the Rock side, I will go with the Rockridge Rockets getting a three-peat this year. I think they'll be definitely challenged, but I think the Rockets are the favorite coming into the season without a doubt.
Man, so I hate to spoil things, but in the Northwest Upstate Illini, we all agreed on Lena Winslow.
Right. Well, yeah, of course.
You and I, of course. You and I both agreed on Princeton. And here we go again. We're not going to be the fun ESPN banter and, we're not going to fake an argument here. I'm going to agree with you. And that is what it is. That's what I think. I think Rockridge is going to be the team. Who's in second place in this division?
This is like the other side of the league where I think you could legitimately make an argument for Newman, Erie, Prophetstown, Mercer County, and Orion. I really do. I think any of those four teams could finish second in the league. Like we talked about, I really believe that when those teams all play each other, they will be very competitive, fun, close games. I, though, am leaning with Newman, I think, will finish second.
Defense wins championships. Right. I'm also, in this case, defense gets you second place. I'm going to say Newman comes in second. But that Rockridge Newman game, that's one to circle. I think that's going to be a great game.
Midway through the year should be, that'll be a great game.
And I wouldn't be shocked if the Comets walk away with a win in that one. I think it's going to be close. But I really do like what Rockridge has. I think they win it. So, all right. Well,
that game's up in Sterling this year too. So
that's right. Yep. So, all right. So there we go. We've wrapped it up. We've talked about, I think, just about everything in the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. Man, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. When do you start traveling out and talking to coaches or making the phone calls and scheduling the interviews?
So our first sports line show of the 2024-25 school year, which we have on basically from 9 to 10 a.m. Saturdays throughout the entirety of the school year, is the Saturday before the season starts. So that'll be Saturday, August 24th, I believe. The day after the scrimmages. So So that's when we start with Sportsline, and then we go all the way through the end of May. So Saturday mornings from 9 to 10. We talk a lot about track football during the football season, of course. So if you ever want to add on to your view from, if View from the West isn't enough for you, you can listen to Sportsline on Saturday mornings if you want. We also have a online feed and a podcast feed too. So you can always check us out if you want more track coverage after you get done listening to Greg and Mitch.
I love it. Many of mornings, Saturday mornings, we'd be in the car driving around with my son, either on our way to a practice or on our way somewhere. And I had WRMJ on in the car listening. So, and a lot of times I'd kick him out of the car when he got to practice and say, I'll be there in a minute. I want to hear the end of his interview. So, right. Yeah, I'm in listening. I love it. So
for that. And then we haven't announced this on our WRMJ platforms yet, but we'll do it here because Greg is a part of our, I guess, esteemed panel. So we'll have each week, me, Greg, Mitch, and then my dad will be doing, I think we'll post it on Friday mornings. We'll have picks for all 6 track games, weeks 1 through 9. Yeah. So everybody can get mad at us about that too, if you want.
I was going to say, you're really going to put me in a tough spot here because we've tried to avoid weekly picks, Mitch and I on the pod, trying to be, remain neutral, but you're pushing me and I'm all in. I'm excited.
All right. I can't wait. I love stuff like this. I want people to be mad at me when I'm wrong and dunk on me and everything.
Well, if they're mad, they're going to listen in to hear you, be wrong. Absolutely.
Right.
So,
right. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It should be a good year. And like we talked about throughout the show, I'm so happy that Mercer County's in the track. I think, like you said earlier, great fit for them. And I think they're definitely a strong addition to the league kind of across the board in every sport.
Absolutely.
Fall, winter, spring.
Well, Ty, you will not be a stranger here to View from the West podcast. We'll have to get you in on an Instant Reacts podcast or maybe even our weekly Tuesday show if you want to stop in and talk about a big game. We'd love to have you. So
I'm always on board to join the View from the West show. I remember last year when you had both me and my dad on, yes. We were just in the other room here at the WRMJ studios when he got back from Morrison that week. And then that was the week when Sherrard beat Orion at the last minute. I remember we were sitting in like the main studio here, which there's like a window onto College Avenue is what the main street is here in Aledo. And it was like, we were there till like 1:30 in the morning. I remember when like I was walking in my car and my dad was walking his car when we were leaving. We're like, unbelievable, it's this late. And we had to come back in the next morning to do Sportsline. But that was so fun with you guys and Stocking. I mean, I want to make it though. So if I'm ever on, I want Stocking to be on with me though.
That's true. We didn't have him on last year. We need to, or was he on with you at all? No,
he was on the Instant Reacts with me and my dad when we were on that week. Cause
you want him in the studio or you want him in person?
I need him in person at some point because I remember last year when we did the Instant Reacts with him, we kept going off the Riverdale tangent with him.
Of course we did. Yes.
A proud Ram.
Stocking is a gem. He is a gem. Well, all right, before we wrap this up, quick programming note here. So this was our Three Rivers Athletic Conference, kind of almost like a bonus episode squeezed into the middle of the week here on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. Next week, we'll get back to our regular Tuesday format. So on August 13th will be our Western Big Six preview. I got Matt Schuckman from Muddy River Sports down in Quincy and Matt Randazzo and Corey Kuffler from WQAD. That's a full boat show. They're all on. They got all the info. We're ready to talk forever.
That's the A team.
We're ready to talk forever about the Western Big Six. I'm fired up for that one. Then Mitch gets back from vacation on August 20th. We'll talk Lincoln Land, so the Lincoln Trail and the Prairie Land Conference. We'll get that preview out there. And then the following Tuesday, it's week 1 preview time. We're talking week 1. We'll be recapping some scrimmage games, which will be fun to do. That's a different look this year. So that's the schedule. That's the rundown. Head over to our Twitter account at View from West Pod. Find our updates. We're posting some season previews on each team, just little capsules of information. And of course, find the link to t-shirts. Buy some View from the West merch. Support your local school. I can't wait to see that stuff out at the rivalries and at the games. So, all right, Ty, we'll be in touch. But this was a great episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the work that you and Mitch do. It's, really important covering local interscholastic athletics. You guys do such a great job. I'm a loyal listener to the program, and I just can't, recommend people supporting in whatever way they can View from the West, because it's really a great resource. Especially, we're very lucky to have you guys doing this locally. So thanks for your coverage and thanks for having me on today.
Ah, man, I love it. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's great to hear. All right, to everybody listening, thank you so much. We will talk to you not quite a full week, but next Tuesday. That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.